let's get this started. So for those of you who may not know, my name is Jay Kidd. I'm the lead designer at Wraith Games. We've been around since 2005. There are 12 of us, 3 interns, and we have just under 2,000 square foot of space in Hamilton, Ohio, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar, just outside of Cincinnati. We have a beautiful little studio by the river right above a brewery. It's absolutely wonderful. And a question that we often get asked is, how does one fund as well as maintain a studio? And that's kind of what I'm here to answer right now. So one of the most important things you can do is start by building a team. And the thing about your early days, before you have any funding at all, is that you're probably going to have to find team members who are just as passionate about what you're doing as you are. Now, the reason I say you need a team, because you'll see tons of little solo indies out there, is because ultimately it is very, very difficult to survive in the industry as a solo developer. Now, I am not by any means saying it is impossible. It certainly is not. But for someone to be able to have programming skills, as well as artistic skills, as well as business skills and game design skills, a lot of people forget that the actual design portion of game design is part of the game design process. Who would have thought? In order to actually be able to maintain all of those different hats, it's going to be a substantial time investment. And when you're just starting out, unless you have a lot of additional income that you've built up from another source, or if you have a super, super part-time job, for instance, it's going to be hard to maintain that. And that sort of, brings to the point of how does one fund a studio? Because your team can't be volunteers forever. No one's going to want to be a volunteer forever. Maybe you have found the magical person who does want to volunteer forever, and that's absolutely wonderful. But if you're really willing to go the extra step and turn your hobby into a business, well, you gotta pay people in business. That's just sort of the way it goes. Actually, I have no clue why I'm wearing these headphones, because I can't hear you, and it's ruining my hair anyway. Give me a moment. So, anyway, terribly sorry about that. The thing is that ultimately you could work a soul-sucking, dead-end job and either try to balance your game dev responsibilities while you're doing that, which is by far the most difficult thing you can do, to be very honest. A lot of my team members had to do that starting out. I was very fortunate to be able to sort of leap into this while also being a freelancer, but we'll get to freelance in a moment. You could work a normal 9 to 5, and then you can try to balance your game dev hobby, trying to seed it into a business. Or you could work for a number of years full-time and then take every bit of extra money you have and then store that away in order to be able to sort of quit for 2-3 years at a time, which is also a very, very difficult thing to do. Alternatively, you could have friends or family who are investors. You could even, if you have some smaller successes with other projects, launch something like a Patreon. Now, you may be wondering the Kickstarter route, but I'll get to that in due time. So, all of those are suboptimal at best. You're not going to want to work doing something else because you'll never be able to take that leap. You'll always be saying, no, I'll spend a few more months here, working at this law firm. I'll spend a few more months here working as a mechanic or working in this food restaurant. You'll never actually be able to take that leap because it's difficult, because there's a security net there. Now, that's all well and good, but not everyone has a rich relative or a small collective of people who are willing to give you funds. Not everyone has the ability to sort of take that leap and move forward. Well, there are a couple of options for that. One of which would be freelance. If you're doing it more by yourself or with the company of some other individuals, you could do freelancing on the side. Because if you're in game design, you're more than likely a talented designer or a talented programmer or a talented artist. You could take those skills and put them elsewhere. Again, suboptimal. A lot of people think that freelance is kind of an easy thing to do, but it's just as difficult to do as a 9-to-5, but with all of the same risks as running your own game dev business. You have the problem of, oh, am I going to be able to actually have another client this week? It's too risky to put in the same bundle, even though, Lord knows, I did it for a while, and that's how I know it's not really a good idea. Well, alternatively, what if your team worked on commission projects? For instance, say you had a local bus service who wants to make an app with all of their scheduling things, and they're willing to pay you $5,000 with $1,000 up front, so $6,000 in total to get this done. That sounds wonderful. Only problem is that if you actually look at the local game scene, whether it be in your area or even anywhere else in the Midwest, you have the problem where that's the #1 killer of studios. I'm not even kidding. I have seen so many studios up and die merely because they don't have the time as a studio to worry about the games that they want to make. Instead, it's commission project after commission project after commission project. It's not a good way to run a business. Okay, great, wonderful. I mentioned Patreon before, and that's only really works if you have a pre-built audience. What about Kickstarter? I'm going to tell you right now. Kickstarter is a wonderful, amazing tool. It is a wonderful, amazing tool to build an audience. It is less successful at actually gaining funds. And there are a couple reasons for this. One is because people have been burned by gaming Kickstarters in the past. It's sad to say, but you got too many Mighty No. 9s out there. You have too many games where either the project gets delayed into oblivion, or the game does not turn out particularly well, or even worse, the developers take the money and run. It's awful. Now, on top of that, gaming Kickstarters tend to be unsuccessful. You'll have some of them and they'll gain crazy amounts of money, but you'll notice some of the biggest success stories were actually from a few years ago. Anymore, people are just not willing to spend their money. But as a tool to actually build an audience, it's phenomenal. Because when people feel that they have a monetary investment in something, they absolutely want to follow you on Twitter, follow you on Facebook, follow you on your own website, and engage with you as a developer. It is a great way, whether it be Kickstarter or Indiegogo. I say Kickstarter because more people are willing to trust Kickstarter since there's actually some enforcement behind it. But whatever crowdfunding platform you choose, it's probably best to do once you already have a project or two started, much like Patreon. So, what does that leave? You can't crowdfund, you can't angel invest, because the thing with angel investments, for those who don't know, an angel investment is when people court rich people for basically free money, and then once the investment pays out, they get some sort of share in the company. Well, unfortunately, angel investors don't like what they would consider a manufactured product, typically, and unfortunately games fall into that. It's hard to do friends and family, it's hard to work a 9-to-5, so what are you going to do? What are your options for funding? Bank. Now, I really, really hope that some of you just laughed at that. Because there's this traditional wisdom that why is a bank going to invest in video games? Heck, I remember when I was growing up, when I first said I wanted to do video games, I was told by teachers and my mom and just friends that I had, oh, video games aren't a real job. You can't make money doing video games. Well, this kind of common wisdom that banks feel the same way. And for the most part, that's true. That's absolutely true. What you need is a killer business plan. Because banks do not want to invest in things that they do not understand. So you make them understand. The biggest key to success with a business plan is to make one where you seem like you have complete knowledge of the industry. Okay, all well and good. Well, what's in a business plan? Well, a good business plan, theoretically, is a nice hardcover book. You can get those printed full color from your local print shop for about $30, $40. A little expensive, but it's totally worth it. Worst case, you could also do a PDF and hand it to them on a tablet. But the extra performance of having a nice hardbound thing does go a long way. You need to lay out your objectives. You need to say, this is my company, this is what my company does. You then need to lay out what your team members do and who your team members are, what experience you have, if you have any. And you can always spin experience. You can say, for instance, I know a lot of you that are actually involved with game dev programs at your schools. I bet you've built some prototypes through that. You can mention that in there. You can say, well, I've built 15 different prototypes for these games. I built 5 different prototypes for these games. You can talk about what you do and what your team members do. It's almost like building a resume, but with a lot less information. You'll find out very, very quickly that bankers don't like to read a lot. They like to skim and get the gist of whatever you're about, your sort of boiled down essence, right like that. So, okay, you've explained what your company does, you explained who you are as individuals and what you do. Now you need what is called a SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, a lot of you, especially in college, have probably already done SWOT analyses, whether it be for an art class or a business class. Because most business classes nowadays also have kind of an art as business kind of a section. It's absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to explain what a SWOT analysis is for those who don't know. Strengths are things that you individually are good at. Well, when I say individual, I mean your team is good at. Things that you excel at doing. Maybe you have a particular talent for a particular art style that you feel that your artist is like really good at. Maybe you yourself have a computer sciences degree. That's going to go a far way. Degrees are great, especially when getting money. But don't worry, you don't have to have a degree to get funding. Weaknesses. That's stuff that you know you're bad at. You're probably thinking, why would I tell the bank my weaknesses? That's just going to say, don't fund me. A big neon sign. Well, they want to know that you know yourself. You need to say, my company is not good at art, just in general. With this loan, we are seeking to hire an artist, maybe even a specific artist. Maybe your programmer is kind of new to this and is working with a new engine or a new language that they've not used before. You can then say, our programmer does not know C#, but we have invested in some courses for C#. You need, for every single weakness, to say how you're going to pick yourself up and move forward. Opportunities. Oh, that's great. Strengths and weaknesses are both internal. Opportunities are external. They are things like, oh, I have access to a lawyer. We already have access to a lawyer. Or I'm working with a small business development center, and we will get to small business development centers. They are amazing. We'll get to that near the end. But you can say, as far as opportunities are concerned, we have great things like the West Virginia Game Developers Expo, locally, where we can talk with other developers and we can go see talks. That is a great opportunity. Or maybe, like us, you became Nintendo licensed early on. That was wonderful for a business plan. Like, yep, we are Nintendo licensed developers. Fund us. Now, threats. Threats are external. Now, threats can include competition from other people. In fact, that kind of is what you want to focus on there, but you don't want to overdo it because there is an entire section in the business plan which is all about your direct competition. But competition is definitely something you want to put in there. But maybe you can also talk about the industry itself. You know, mobile phones, their sales aren't as high as they used to be. Also, Steam just got rid of Greenlight. Steam Direct means that there's a bunch of new developers on Steam. On top of that, Humble Bundle was just purchased. I'd call that a threat. It might be more difficult for smaller teams to get on Humble Bundle. And if that was something you were hoping for a source of revenue, it's something you want to list. And then you talk about why it's not a big deal. It's just like weaknesses, but it's external. Great. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's one of the most important parts of your business plan. Moving on, what's beyond that? Well, you need to actually lay down not only your competition, and you can do this in one section, or you can do it in two sections. Not only your competition, but also businesses that are like yours that you want to model yourself after. And if it's a business like yours that you want to model yourself after, they're probably competition anyway, so there's no harm in boiling them down into one section. You can talk about studios that are roughly your size, that are in your same geographic area, that have been around for as long as you have. Like, we didn't do our business plan until much later in our business, mostly because we were doing that self-funding thing, which that was a nightmare, to say the least. Well, okay, fine, great. What are some businesses? Well, we said that when we were setting out to do this, we wanted people who weren't too small to be off the radar. We wanted them to be very Googleable. But we also didn't want something too big as to where it was an outlier. Because not only are they going to want to see how this competition is threatening to you, but they also want to see, if you're including this part in there, it's the same section, they want to see what they can expect your returns to be. We picked Yacht Club Games, The Behemoth, and Double Fine. Mostly because they didn't have a lot of employees, they've been around for basically as long as we have, and they are pretty darn successful without being Flappy Bird or Angry Birds or Minecraft. Those instant successes which don't actually make a lot of sense on paper. It was mostly luck as well as flash marketing that got them to that point anyway. Cool, great, wonderful. You have that actually put out. What's next on the business plan? You need a timeline. Timeline's weird, because they want up to 3 years of your business. Man, I don't even know what I'm eating for breakfast tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 3 years. That's why you take it step by step. They want a 6-month timeline, a 1-year timeline, a 2-year timeline, and a 3-year timeline. For your business, you should probably know where you're going to be in 6 months, in at least broad strokes. You can say, okay, we do this development, we do this release, we go to these events. Great, cool stuff. Easy to comprehend. Years a little harder. Gonna have to think on that. Okay, you can follow a similar trajectory, but they're expecting both loss as well as growth. They're expecting you to have lost a bit of money, and they're expecting you to grow in some way, whether it be hire more employees, expand some of your space, release more products. Cool, figured that out. You thought 1 year was hard. 2 years like the Wild West. You're going out there into parts unknown. Like wagon train. Okay. Could be a little tougher. I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 years. I don't know where my business is going to be in 2 years. You're allowed to guess. Because they know that you don't know exactly where you're going to be in 2 years. But if you make a realistic projection, something that they can follow, where they're like, no, that makes sense. That makes sense for the type of business you are. Nothing seems too crazy. You seem to have accounted for some pitfalls. Wonderful. If you thought 2 years was like the Wild West, 3 years is magical unicorns in space. It's a fantasy land. I don't expect any of you to understand exactly where your business is, even in broad strokes. where it's going to be in 3 years. But you have to try, and you have to keep it realistic. They want you to be on your feet in 3 years, but they also want you to know how the business operates. And that's important. Next up on this business plan, great stuff. You have to actually do a cost analysis. You have to say, these are the things I have purchased for my business. This is how much investment that I've invested. For us, it was about a year worth of studio. We ended up investing thousands of dollars into equipment. We ended up going to a whole bunch of different conventions, things like that. So you need to say, these are the office supplies I've already purchased. These are the training courses for my team. This is the amount of stuff I paid my team. And don't forget budgeting for marketing. You have things like conventions. We go to about 12 events a year, and so each one of them is about $500. It's crazy stuff. Now, when you're just starting out, that's probably not a lot of stuff. You can probably say, yes, I've put in about $300 into my studio. Maybe you're a little beefier. Maybe you put in like $5,000. You know, maybe you've only put in, hey, man, I'm going to buy you a sandwich. That's fine, because you can also then explain that you have manpower invested into this project. Now, you also then have to say, these are the things I need to buy. These are all the office supplies I don't have. This is all the marketing I need. This is the studio space that I want to buy. Say you want to buy a studio space. Maybe you just want a beefy computer to be able to render this stuff. You have to list that down. Oftentimes, they want a cost assessment to go with this timeline. So you may have to do up to 3 years of what you think you're going to have to spend. And that has to include how you're going to pay your team and how you're going to pay yourself. If they see that you're not paying yourself on there, they're not going to fund you. Because they're like, oh, he doesn't understand. You have to make a living off of this. Be realistic, though. Start yourself with a realistic salary. Grow it. Okay. Now you have to understand that you know your market. You have to talk about what platforms you want to be on. You have to talk about how those platforms break down. For instance, I know that on mobile, 75% of all mobile players are women and girls either between the age of 10 to 16 or between the ages of 36 and 45. Why do I know that? Apple and Android publish that information. Well, Apple and Google. They publish that information. You have to invent an idealized customer. You have to say, I know that this is what my average customer looks like. I know that this average mobile customer also spends, it's 10 hours a week, which isn't a lot, 10 hours a week on these mobile devices. So you're going to be on Steam. Luckily, Valve provides this information as well. You can break it down. Now, Steam looks very different. The average user there is male. The average user there is actually 35 years old. It's crazy stuff. You don't really think much about that. You're like, oh no, Steam, you're like 16-year-old, it's fine. No, the average user is a 35-year-old male. The average user there spends roughly $2,000 a year on games, and they play roughly, I believe it was 6 hours a day on Steam stuff. It's crazy. But you have to point this out, and you have to say where you got this information. Gamma Sutra is an industry blog. It's run by the same people that do GDC as well as IndieGames.com. They used to do Indie Game Magazine. I don't know if that's still around. And of course the Game Developer Career Guide. They have a lot of information on this stuff. But a quick search on Google, that'll also get it to you. Just make sure you have recent information, because if you go and say, okay, Steam sales breakdown, the first thing that comes up might be from 2012. You need something a little more recent than that. Well, what if you're Nintendo? What if you're Sony? What if you're Microsoft? And you're wanting to be developers for these platforms? Maybe you're not yet. Maybe you already are. Who knows? They're a little more secretive about their information. They have suspiciously nicely round numbers Because normally you can say, the average Steam game makes this, and it's like decimal points. It's great stuff. Everything is suspiciously round, meaning they're probably doing a little bit of rounding themselves. On top of that, they don't like doing the whole demographics thing. But that's where actual searches come in handy, and Gama Sutra will definitely help you with that. But you need to explain, I know everything about these platforms. Now, when you're writing this business plan, you want it to have nice, pretty pictures. Either pretty pictures of your projects, or pretty pictures of your team, or pretty pictures from events, something that can be printed, something in 300 dpi. No, very little digital artifacting on there. You don't want any of that. Also, if you have to, buy stock photos. They're great. You're kind of expected to buy stock photos. When you put in this other information, make it a visual timeline with labels underneath. When you have all this information for your platforms, have nice little pie charts and graphs. They love those. And most importantly, middle school reading level. This is going to sound really ridiculous, but I learned most of this from talking with a small business development center representative locally here in Hamilton. Your city will have one. But the thing was that he had mentioned, he's like, you're writing at a college reading level. And I'm like, yeah, sorry, I kind of dumbed it down a little bit. I should be doing post-college because, that's adults. Like, no, that's a problem. You should be doing a middle school reading level. What? I mean, some of the stuff here is a high school reading level. It's not even, really? Like, yeah, no, they don't want to have to read all this. They're going to just skim it. They want to be able to get the quick bullet points. You want it to be very, very eloquently written, but you don't want anything beyond 3 syllables if you can help it. You don't want anything that the average human being may not, have to go pick up a dictionary for. Basically, the reading level of this talk would be probably a good idea. I had to learn that too. Apparently when you give public talks, it's supposed to be at a middle school reading level. Whew. But yeah, so the thing is that's what you want in a business plan. And you want to go into the offices of these banks. Good credit, bad credit, doesn't matter. It helps to have good credit if possible. But you want to go in there with confidence. And not overconfidence, you don't want to seem cocky, but you want to basically look them in the eye, and every word you say should be telling them, I know how this industry operates. I know how to give you a return on your investment. And don't ask for too little money. If you ask for anything under $5,000, they're going to laugh you out of the office. And if you ask for anything over $100,000 when it's your first time loan, they're going to laugh you out of the office there too. $25,000, great starting cash for a small studio. Probably the sweet spot. $30,000 if you want a little bit more, $10,000 if you think you need a little less. But if you go low, they're just going to say, then why do you need a loan? Can't your business make $5,000? Fair enough. I mean, starting capital is still important, though. You can't make $5,000 unless you spent $5,000 elsewhere. But that's just the way banks operate. Now, say you don't want to go in the bank. Credit unions are wonderful. Credit unions are much like banks, but they are owned directly by the members, by the people who are doing the banking. When you open a credit union account, you actually get a part of the stock. You get a little stock certificate saying I'm a partial owner. And you actually can make decisions. Now, what that means is they love helping out the community. And the community means small businesses. Great stuff. They tend to be a bit on the older side, which means that technology businesses are a little riskier. They also tend not to lend out as much money as banks. There's no harm in asking both. Now, of course, if you get approved by both, make sure that your business can pay them back, because then you might be stuck with, oh, I have to make a $700 a month payment to a bank and a $300 a month payment to a credit union, and my studio still isn't making any money. I've seen some studios die that way. You do not want to go down that route. Okay, so what do you do from there? Well, there's actually one thing that I forgot that you need to include in your business plan, which actually segues right into this next segment perfectly. You need a strategic team. And a strategic team means a lawyer that you use regularly, an accountant that you use regularly, a banker that you use regularly, probably the person who gave you your loan, or the person you intend to give you your loan. You can slide that right in there. Or maybe even if you just have a business account, get a business account. They're basically free. You just have to prove that you're a business, and we'll get into that in a second. How to prove your business, which is important for the whole process. But you also should talk about a small business development representative if you have one. So, okay, wonderful. Business plan done. You should probably become an LLC. It depends on the state, but usually it's anywhere between $10 to $300. Usually probably about $50, I'd say, is the national average, to file a form to become an LLC. Now, if you're starting your business just on your own, you're what's called a sole proprietorship. That means that it's you, and if you get sued, like the business gets sued, you get sued. Don't want that. Now, you can become all sorts of different types of businesses. You could be an S Corp or a C Corp. You could be a limited partnership. If you're starting out, it is more than likely best to become an LLC, a limited liability company, formerly limited liability corporation, but again, it depends on the state. Well, that means that if anyone sues the business, you yourself are not directly on the line. On top of that, you should file online federally for an EIN, which is an employment identification number. That is the social security number of your business. You do that after you become an LLC. If you're going to sell stuff at conventions, you need a vendor's license as well. Here in the city of Hamilton, a vendor's license is $15 for the whole year. I think in New York it's like $300. It's not a big deal. You also don't actually need one, but if you're going to sell physical merchandise at an event, like t-shirts. We got t-shirts when we go to events. We sell those, and we need a vendor's license basically for any city where we're selling. Sometimes the convention hall will actually have a vendor's license, but it's fine. A business license itself isn't necessarily needed because you are more than likely going to be doing most of your sales digitally, and if you're for like your actual games. If you are going to manufacture and sell your physical games, you're going to obviously need a business license for that. But talking about strategic team, you should have a lawyer that you often go to, and there are many small business lawyers that will help you out. In fact, I encourage you to get a lawyer before you make any decision, because I'm not one. And just because this advice has worked for me and for other people doesn't mean it will work for you. You should definitely talk with a lawyer about whether or not the things you're doing are even legal. You should also get an accountant because, well, taxes are hard, and if you don't do them right, then your business is going to get shut down or at least fined a lot of money. Most accountants, especially small business accountants, they make those. Small business accountants will actually charge less if they have to do very little work. You should also talk to a small business representative. Your city, or at very least your state, will have a small business representative. I almost guarantee you. They are places, a small business development center is a place, but a small business representative is a person who will guide you through the process of making your business. Now, a small business development center will give you resources, whether it be classes or sometimes even space, like co-op space or even a rentable office that you can utilize while you're growing your business. They're a big resource that will help you get press as well, so you can send your press releases to local newspapers. Once you have all that done, you should start worrying about your social media. Basically, Facebook, you should post 2 times a day. And the reason I'm going a little faster now is to make sure we have enough time for questions, because I saw on the schedule that we shut down at 1:45 on this talk. I'm used to giving 1 2-hour talks, so working a little fast. The thing is that you can do 2 posts a day on Facebook, make them something original, interesting, and you should also do 6 posts a day on Twitter. Wow, 6 posts a day on Twitter. That's crazy. Well, you should probably do a weekly blog of some sort, maybe even a monthly blog. If it's a weekly blog, you should remind people in one of those 6 tweets every single day, 6 tweets a day, 5 days a week. You should remind people about these tweets at different times each day. The last tweet of the day should be something that is either a question or a quote that's relevant to what you're doing. You should take pictures at events. You should take pictures of your workspace. You should take screenshots of what you're doing. Make GIFs and videos. Hashtags are wonderful. 2 to 3 hashtags per post. Indie dev, game dev, indie games, made in Unity, made in Unreal. Those are great hashtags that you can utilize. You also want to follow your fellow developers. You want to then engage with them. You also want to make sure that you are following under half of the amount of people who follow you. So if you follow people, you can do a mass follow, like 15 people a day, and if they don't follow you back within a week, unfollow them. On Fridays, you do a little follower Friday to talk about your new followers. Engage with them personally. I see a lot of people doing big follower Friday things where it's a ton of just usernames. No, seek out, put one person in there and say, they are a follower of mine, they do this great thing, you should follow them. Social media is your best friend when you're marketing your indie studio. The big reason for this is because ultimately, traditional marketing no longer works for video games. Banner ads don't work for video games. Magazine ads don't work. But if you can engage with your community on a one-to-one basis, that's what you want to do. And as soon as you have decided to make the studio, that's when you start tweeting. That's when you start doing Facebook posts. You should also get a newsletter from something like MailChimp. It's free to set up, and you can just send out a monthly newsletter or something. Little aside before we move on to questions about social media. And since I can't see any of you, you may want to start raising your hands for questions so that they can start being texted to me. But a little aside on social media. Use a tool like Buffer or Hootsuite where...
Anybody got his number?
That, all of your tweets can be done a day or 2 ahead of time. I do all of my tweets at night before I go to bed, and I say, okay, here are the 6 tweets for tomorrow, then I go to sleep, and they go out on a schedule. You can set a schedule. They even have it where it'll analyze your followers to note when they engage, so that it'll be more likely that you get a view from those things. Now, are there any questions? I know I kind of had to lightning round this a little bit at the end, and there's actually tons more stuff to talk about. If you don't get your question in today, you can reach out to me at j@wraithgames.com, WRAITH games.com. Go to our YouTube channel, and there are also a ton of other talks like this where I've done for other events, and so it's pretty easy to get to pick my brain on that. But yeah. Questions?
You probably won't have to type in Google Hangouts for it. Just tell them we're...
Well, we're in Skype.
Texting.
I don't know if the questions are just going to pop up, or for all I know, there could be no one in the audience, and I would have no clue. There could literally be no one.
There's a dozen people here, tell them.
You can't see these Skype messages.
Oh, okay. We got Josh typing right now. Normally when I do these events, I can see everyone there, and I have the ability to make little jokes. I almost run it like a failed stand-up comedy tour. Okay. Let's see right here. Yes, I can see this message.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions?
I can see the message.
Somebody give me a question.
All. We're all. Who's all? Who? How many of you are there?
Half a dozen people.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Um,
Dozen.
A dozen. Ooh, neat.
had a question for him. Asking him with.
Okay. So are there any questions from
with the
anyone?
laying out of the competition section, do you not want to compare yourself
Yes.
to a really big
Wonderful.
guys?
Then I will shut up so I can
with
actually.
the layout.
With regards
I'll stop
to
asking you
the
questions.
section, like laying out the competition section, of the business plan, do you not want to compare yourself to the big guys?
Do you not?
With regard to the competition section of the business plan, do you want to compare yourself to the big guys? You want to compare yourself to the bigger guys. That's one of the things that I was saying. You don't want to choose Bungie. You don't want to choose something AAA. Bungie, Valve, Nintendo themselves, Retro Studios. Well, maybe Retro Studios, depending on your scope. You want to pick people who are larger indies. So, for instance, Vlambeer, larger indie. Inti Creates, even though, obviously their success hasn't been great recently. Like I said before, Yacht Club Games is great. You have Bossa Studios out in the UK. They did Surfing Simulator, wonderful. I believe they did Surfing Simulator. Those are larger indies because they're people who will cause you trouble, but they're not making multi-billion-dollar games. So yeah, that's actually a great question. Because if you go too little, it's hard to kind of Google them, ultimately. And the people reading your business plan really want to be able to be like, oh, I know kind of who those are. So yeah. Okay, next question.
Yes.
How does he divvy up his time, like percentage-wise, with marketing, social media, developing, brainstorming? It's a lot to handle.
And what's your name?
Julie.
Just so I can put it.
How do you divvy up the time between marketing, social media, development, brainstorming, etc.? Okay, so, I love this question. This is great. As far as brainstorming is concerned, we have a kind of a large team. That's the problem when you're a company as old as ours that hasn't done anything important until recently. What you do is you have, at the beginning of the month, you have like a pitch meeting. And we find that works pretty well. If you have too many ideas on the board, you don't want a pitch meeting, but we do a pitch meeting about every month to talk about potential game ideas. We then divvy up our team into little pods, about 3 people each, 1 designer, 1 programmer, and one artist. And they go out and do things. And then there's a weekly meeting to sort of talk about development itself, and that's where a lot of the brainstorming happens. You'll find that brainstorming happens on the fly a lot. Now, as far as development is concerned, development is the thing you should do most. You should do most development if you can, do that like 10 hours a day, if possible. I find myself not sleeping for days on end. Don't do that, mind you. It is actually terrible for productivity. But if you can sit down and get a good day's work, even if it's like, oh, I got 5 hours this whole week, it should still be the thing that is the highest percentage that you do. Development, and you want to be able to take your stuff and give it to your team members, or if you're doing it solo, you then like make it even thirds. Like I'm going to program now, and I'm going to do music now, and things like that. Social media is hilarious because if you're anything like me, I pop open the business Twitter when I'm supposed to be working. I will just be like a little distracted, like, why is this not working? Illustrator, stop being stupid. Like it's supposed to be scalable. Shout at the heavens, and then I'll just pull up social media. Then from there, I'll see other cool developers. And as you start going to events, and I definitely encourage you to go to as many events as humanly possible. Once you're going to events, you'll actually make friends with these other developers. So you'll be like, wow, that's a really good sketch. Great job, man. And then you can like it and share it and whatever. And then you can do your social media from there very organically. Because you don't want to just follow people. Once you follow people, you have to start interacting with them. Because otherwise, where's the value for them or you? You want to be their friend if you can, and build a community around not only your work, but also encouraging other people's works. As far as actually making posts that aren't just like replies and stuff, though, that is, I take like a half an hour before I go to bed. It's really quick. Now, early on, I kind of struggled, and I'm like, wow, I stared at the screen for an hour, I don't know what to tweet. But it got to the point where it's just like, it's a real quick process right before I go to bed, make sure everything's spell checked, make sure everything has the right number of hashtags, stuff like that. Now, as far as traditional marketing is concerned, traditional marketing, if you can hire someone to do that for you, that would be better. We're working with some people who are going to be doing some of our marketing later, but we also have a couple internal people on our team who do our marketing for us. Because when I was doing it by myself, it was dumb. It was bad. As far as like making a trailer, yeah, you can make a trailer or whatever, taking the place of like your normal development time. But I wouldn't worry about traditional marketing too much. On the flip side of that, always be reaching out to podcasters and bloggers to give them copies of your game. At some point, I need to give a talk in an event about how to reach out to press. But even contacting local radio stations and newspaper, that is very organic marketing. It's very press-centric rather than being advertisement based. I just take a day to do that. A day out of the month to just contact a whole bunch of people, and then as those interviews and things come up, then you can do them. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Got another question?
Unless that was inadequate. If any of you, if Isaac or Julie or anyone else who's going to be asking questions thinks that I have answered their question poorly, just tell Josh, and he's going to tell me to answer it better.
So what was the first thing you said?
How big was his founding team?
How did that happen?
Yeah, skip them.
Have you?
I think it's better to start with
You
you.
copy it and paste it.
How big?
How big was my starting team? So my starting team in high school, yes, the company was founded in high school,
and what's your name?
Was 3 people. And it was tiny. It was just the 3 of us, and I was the only person doing any work. We then almost immediately brought on 2 other guys, and they started actually doing work, and my original 2 partners left. And one of the people who joined right quick, his name is Thorne. He's actually our business director now. So he's the one who does all the money stuff because I hate doing it. I hate numbers. Starting team was very, very small. It then ballooned into something like 15 volunteers during high school. And the thing about high school volunteers is they're not going to do anything. So they left over time. And so starting team, we had different phases of the business. We had more of a hobbyist phase and then more of the small business phase. So 3 is probably the best answer for that. As far as have I hired employees or contractors? Yes. Technically, I am the boss man here at the team, so unfortunately I have to be like, oh, you're on this. It's as much as I would like it to be a democracy, I am the person who has to be like, oh no, you're a member of the team and you're hired or you're fired, things like that. Take money, do task. Sometimes please volunteer, do task, but that's rare anymore. As far as contractors are concerned, yes. We had a couple people who started off as contractors, who started off as freelancers that we'd hire in. Good contract work. I can speak, I swear. And they ended up joining the team, actually. And we do have a musician who is who does contract work for us. His name is Glenn Ty. Yes, great pun right there. His real name is Glenn. So he is, but we're also working on hiring him full-time as our actual in-house musician. So it's not uncommon, but it's best to hire actual employees if you can. Next question.
How long until they start making money, until you could actually pay yourself a salary?
Okay, so how long until you could actually pay yourself / your company start making money? So that is a weird question because in many ways our company hasn't. And that's probably a weird thing to say, but we are not yet to the point where every single team member is full-time. And it's infuriating. We have some part-time people, and we have some people who are also still working on it's royalties based, where they only get paid once we ship some stuff. And so we made a decision kind of a while back where some of us more of the important, like more of the vital roles in the company would go full-time. Just to be able to keep everything going, as well as being able to pay for the actual building and stuff. And I'd be lying if I said occasionally we didn't have to go, dip into our own funds. But for us, it was like a decade. And that sounds really disheartening, but we only started acting like a real business a few years ago. So instead of looking at how long ours kind of went, because we were basically a game making club for the first several years of what we did. I think the better question to answer would be how long would a studio tend to expect if once they start acting like a business? And I would say 1 to 2 years. I would say you're going to want to coast off of loans and donations for about 1 to 2 years, and that's when you should be expecting to be able to have your entire team paid full time, as well as have all of your expenditures, above a certain level.
I want to ask one here. If that's okay.
It's actually really funny. I don't know if the big fancy mic is the one that's actually doing it right now, or if it's just the crappy laptop mic. So if I turn away from this, it might be harder to hear me. Okay, can I give a brief timeline? Oh, I love the word brief, because I do tend to talk a lot. So a brief timeline of when business started / how long you've been around as a developer. Okay, so we started in 2005 under the name Mind's Eye Games, and that lasted the name lasted 6 months. We then became Wraith Games, and then we built what we called the 50 terrible prototypes, which were little crappy almost game. This was before game jams were a thing, at least to my knowledge. Little terrible prototypes, 50 of them. And then we submitted a project to a publisher. The publisher hated it. And so by that time, it was 2009. During that time, we then, disheartened, moved on to making another project called Physics. We submitted that to a publisher. They agreed to publish it. And then in 2011, they went bankrupt before the project was finished. At that point, we went back to the drawing board. We were trying to figure out whether or not we even needed a physical space at that time. Then we started working on the revival of the prototype of our current game, Collapsus, as well as released our first actual commercial game, Fly Guy. Don't play it, it's awful. In 2011, of course it was bad. We then got a physical studio space, became an LLC, and then started actually like hiring people, as well as making the first real version of physics December of 2014. So we also did a massive rebrand. We had this, if you look behind me, you see this terrible logo on this old shirt. We then have this beautiful new logo that was created in 2014 as well. So we kind of rose from the ashes by the time 2015 rolled around. Now, we then started winning awards and stuff in 2016, and then it was early 2017 when we expanded from 300 square foot of studio to nearly 2,000 square foot. And that's 2015, 2016 was also when we started getting interns from local colleges.
Right.
Ask him, should the social media,
Next question.
Social media, should your like Twitter posts and your Facebook, basically your Twitter posts, should your Twitter posts, your 6 Twitter posts be globally time scale, like noon Japan, noon China, noon Middle East, yeah, like noon across the world?
I think that rephrasing might have been a little clearer, but
Ooh! That is a really good question. Should your 6 Twitter posts be globally timescaled, i.e. noon across the world? Oh, that's actually something. Okay, so one of the interesting things is when you're starting as an indie developer, your market is really US. It's really difficult to market yourself globally. Now, Collapsus, on the other hand, it's being released in the EU, in Asia, as well as Russia, and probably Australia as well. Though we haven't talked to any Australian publishing ends. All of our tweets are still scaled for the US. Not only that, it's actually Eastern time. Wow, that is I don't know if the tool, because we use Buffer specifically, I don't know if Buffer can do that. And that's a really good question. Because you only have the one Twitter account. Huh.
just like that.
I don't know if that even works. That's a very good question. Yeah. Well, the thing is, so you have.
Insert sassy emoji here.
Since you have the one Twitter account, theoretically all Twitter users would see it as soon as it's posted. Unless you had a different account for the different markets. So you would have like Wraith Games Asia, Wraith Games Europe, which I think would almost dilute your followers at that point. Well, one of the things that's interesting about Twitter is the fact that I go to bed and I wake up and I just scroll through my entire day of stuff that people have posted, and that's pretty common. So I don't think it really matters, but it's definitely something to look into if it's even possible. So yeah, good question. I don't know of any. I wish I was actually talking with you. Do you know of any companies that do that at all? Is that a capability of Twitter?
I feel like I know that there have been one or two indie developers who have.
Unless there's going to be an answer to my question, then we could move on to the next one. But
I can't name any specific.
yeah.
Building universe, we have people all over the world, so we have people awake posting stuff at night while we're asleep. So, like, any stuff like that is really stuff.
Oh, he's heard about it on podcasts. Okay. That's fascinating. I will have to do some research, and if I find anything, I will post about it on Twitter. I'll say that. I will go that far, because if it is something that is doable, then I would say it's probably worth doing. Yes, I would agree that it would be worth doing. Another student, Chloe, who works for Zelda Universe. Oh, wonderful! I actually love Zelda Universe. Says they have people all over the world who post in their local time zones. The local time zones of the developer, and the local time zone of the recipient. I assume you mean the local time zone of the recipient, which is
Of your different manager,
yeah.
if you're different like writers.
Also, Chloe from Zelda Universe. Because I love the site so much, you can also contact me at j@wraithgames.com, and we can pick each other's brains. Wonderful site.
So that would be, I guess.
But yeah, so that's interesting. If I find out anything
You said the posters or?
Yeah, like, so if people
about it, because that's probably how I'm going to spend the rest of my day. Because I was expecting to be out there with you guys, and I
So I should just
couldn't.
say in their local times?
Yeah.
Entire day is free. Of course,
Developers post?
Very honestly, but probably best to actually get some work done, since it was a planned work day. Problems with being your own boss: you get to set your own schedule, which means sometimes you forget to work. The developer post local times. Yeah. So we post in our local time zone. Which is
Anyway.
yeah. Okay, moving on from this question, because I like I said, I don't have a great answer for it. But moving on from this question, I'd love to answer some more. Am I okay for another few minutes? I'm okay for as long as you want me. Because, like I said, I'm supposed to be there with you. So theoretically, people could have been walking up to my booth and picking my brain, which is, I'm as good for as long as you want to keep throwing things at me.
Ask him for something with regards to...
Yeah, I literally cleared my entire schedule to come to this, and
With
then
regards to getting out the loans, for
just fell apart.
should you lowball the amount of return?
Sorry, I didn't mean to get all. So.
And if so, how
Okay,
far should you
so
lowball?
should you... Sorry.
Should you lowball your return on your game?
He mentioned something about that, you don't wanna go
Yeah.
too low.
Like, how far should your expected return be?
Well, this isn't for giving it to the bank, it's for yourself, really.
Well, I don't know.
But with regards to loans, I'll be giving it to the bank, so.
Is that a trash can right there? Yes, okay.
With regards to loans, for safety's sake, should you lowball the return on investment? Yeah. No, you absolutely should. You shouldn't lowball it so low as where they're going to laugh you out of the bank. But yeah, you definitely want to take your lower third, somewhere like the higher point of the lower third of your projections. And when I say projections, I mean like after looking at other companies, what they kind of make. And when you look at other companies, you don't just look at the other companies that you're actually going to use in your business plan. You want to look at as many other companies as humanly possible, so you can get sort of a good idea. Now you can remove, when you're doing your research, you can remove outliers. Like there'll be games on iOS that make like $20, and you're like, oh no, they're not going to be in my projections because clearly they have done something wrong. They've done something that's not really a good business practice somehow, whether they didn't market themselves or something. But then you also want to remove Mojang, for instance, just because why is there so much money? I love Minecraft, but man, and then take an average of those after you've picked out the random little outliers. And you want to look at people who are making similar products to your own, even if you can't really figure your game into a genre, you still want to look at it that way. and then you would dissect that into thirds, and then the highest point of your lower third is probably a safe bet to say that's where your estimate is. No, I actually I do want to bring up one little other point as well, because I read investment as insurance right there. Get small business insurance. It's cheap. We have $1 million policy. It's $30 a month. Just little aside, not pertaining to any of your questions. That was just something that I skipped over that I would normally do in a longer talk. Just get small business insurance, please. No one wants to get sued into oblivion. But yeah, so higher end of your lower third of your projections.
I'm gonna put one in here.
How long did it take to put together business plans? So we were doing the business plan as part of a business course provided by our Small Business Development Center. One of the reasons I love those guys is because they're just great resources, and they're free. They're paid for by your local, state, or county government. It's wonderful stuff. So we did it across a 10-week course, and then I submitted that to the teacher, who's a business analyst, and I submitted that to him, and he loved it. And then I destroyed it and rewrote it because it wasn't up to my personal thought. And the problem with that was because there was a contest for the best plan in the class, and I came in second. And that's why I tore it down and rebuilt it from scratch and resubmitted it later. So the rebuild process took about 2 months, including research, plus then we had the 10-week course. So like actual work on it during that 10 weeks, I'd say maybe, another month, so it would take a couple months to do it, it's not that bad.
Got anything else?
Would you recommend going for a master's in games? Do you think that would affect your chances?
Yes, please.
That's a really good question.
Oh, okay. So, unpopular opinion here. No, I would not recommend getting a master's in game design. Instead, what I would do, and keep in mind, this is probably the old fogey in me. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. What I would do, because if you're doing your own business, then it's probably easy to learn this stuff without throwing yourself into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. If you are looking to join someone else's company, then what you would probably want to do is, if you are a designer, you'd probably want to take a multimedia arts and design course, or a degree in multimedia arts and design, if your university provides it. And then during that, if they have a game design class or a game design minor, then you'd want to do that. And then also, because multimedia arts and design is mostly an art and design thing, then if I were you, I'd pick up some programming classes as well. So, because you're going to have electives. So it would be good to take at least an object-oriented programming class, if not a game programming class, in conjunction with a multimedia arts and design major, and then a game design minor or a game design class. Some universities, even though they offer a game design major, only have one game design class, and then they have you do stuff from comp sci or from multimedia arts and design. It's weird. So if you don't have the option for a minor, then a minor in business. So just pick and choose classes. Now, if you're going into more of the programming end, get a computer science major, and then take some multimedia arts and design classes, and then either a game design class or a game design minor in that. If you can't do minors, like we have a university up here in Miami, they have a game design major, a game design minor, and a game design track for both multimedia arts and design as well as for computer science. So you could do any number of those. Now, smaller schools may vary. Miami's a nationally rated college, so I don't know how they stack up. They're just kind of like right next door. We do work with places like Shawnee State and like EKU a little bit. Well, I say work with. We're on their intern thing, and occasionally I'll call them up or they'll call us up, and we'll pick each other's brains. I wouldn't say works with, but it complicated. I don't know. But they both have actual dedicated game design programs. But I think that theirs are more comp sci oriented. Last I checked. So we'll go with that. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't really speak for their programs. But no, I wouldn't say going to your traditional 4-year and getting a game design degree would necessarily be the best idea. I think that maybe if the business fell through for whatever reason, you'd be a hard hire. Because if you remember a few years ago, you had all that stuff from DeVry, where DeVry had a game in simulation technologies degree. It overflowed the market with people who weren't really capable of doing the job, and in an industry where AAAs weren't really hiring, because AAAs still aren't hiring a lot of people. So from a small business perspective, it doesn't make sense. And then you go afterward to try to join either a AAA company or even a non-games company, and it just seems like no one's going to want to take the degree. It's a very niche degree that doesn't seem to have much longevity to it. I don't even know if it's going to be around in the next 10 years. I think more minors or more tracks would end up popping up instead. But again, that's probably just the old guy in me. So we handle QA on a per platform basis, where we send it out to people to do it for us. Basically, we do a lot of internal and external betas and things, and we take a lot of notes for that. But I mean Nintendo handles their own QA, Sony handles their own QA, Microsoft handles their own QA. You send them builds and they give you back notes. It's not really the best. QA is kind of hard on mobile because there's not a company, no one does that. So all you can really do is have as many, watch as many people play the game as possible, take a lot of good notes, make sure that they have a feature with which they can submit bug reports, things like that. Next. Hopefully there's more. Is that a challenge? Yes. The last time I gave a talk, it was about VR, and getting people to ask questions was like pulling teeth. It was so weird. I'm like, man, we're facing down the most interesting technology of our lifetimes, and no one has any questions for me. That's not okay. Because with games and business, I'm expecting you guys to have so many questions. I want to answer as much as you will allow me to on this platform, because I think that fostering the growth of small game studios, especially with students, I think it's vital. So as much as I can answer, yes, it is a challenge. Hit me with questions, even the tough ones. Even if I don't have a good answer, I can at least make a stepping stone for you to get a good answer at some point.
What was that?
Ask if he's wearing
Sorry if I got like super passionate all of a sudden. That wasn't. Are you wearing pants? Yes. Yes, I'm wearing pants. There's a pants in the office. You can probably see those. There's a pants in the office policy. Wow, my white balance changed. That's hilarious. Let me re-white balance. There we go. Yeah. So we have a pants in the office policy. We have a shirt in the office policy, and we do not require shoes here though, because that's more cleaning. It's more. It's awful. Do you still use volunteers for anything? Yes. We use volunteers where we are legally allowed to use volunteers. So you guys may not know anything about my studio, but we recently won an accessibility award from the Game Gamers charity because we put a ton of accessibility options in our stuff. So one of the types of volunteers that we love to have are disabled volunteers, people who can play the crap out of our games and give us the best feedback we possibly can. So feedback volunteers are great. On top of that, unpaid interns are effectively volunteers, but there are a lot of laws as to what an unpaid intern can do. Like for instance, they can't directly make the company any money. They are not allowed to displace someone who already exists in the company. They're allowed to do any of their work, and it has to be for their direct academic benefit. So what we do is we have our interns, we make little teams, the way Wraith does our little pods, little three-person pods. We make our interns do that, and they work on Game Jam games, and then we have mentors for them. So in a way, that's kind of like free advertising for us, but our main point with that is just so we have better people who are more capable of doing jobs in the future, like people who could found their own studio and make better games in general. So they are technically volunteers. We have volunteers who technically every team member who does an event with us. We don't pay our people for going to events just because we do so many events. We'd have no money. So every team member volunteers to go to an event, and we do those kind of as a group. So yeah, we still use volunteers for things. Not much, but for things.
Sorry, it's just a little thing.
Do you pay them to get into events? What do you mean by that? We pay for, the company pays for the booth, and we give them the badges that we get. They're still our team members. They're just volunteering to do a different job. But yeah, we pay for the booth itself when that requires things, and we get the badges and we get the chairs, and they do that. I also tend to take everyone out to one big meal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I also I pay for the gas, and I pay for things. I pay for gas and parking and stuff. But I don't pay them for the hours that they serve at the booth. We're hoping that one day we will get to a point where that isn't incredibly cost prohibitive. But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
What would you consider your greatest commercial
Good.
success, and then your greatest success when it comes to game development? When it comes to a game they develop, so their greatest commercial success and then their greatest success, but those aren't necessarily the same thing.
As far as games, what do you consider your greatest commercial success? How about the greatest success? Not necessarily the same. Okay, so greatest commercial success is probably Raid Arkanoid, because we've only released 2.5 games. So Raid Arkanoid did technically make the most money. That money was for charity. So that, but it was still the. Actually, I don't know about that. I don't know if that actually went to charity. It was supposed to, but the people organizing it, I don't know if they actually sorted it out properly. Hopefully they did. But so Great Arkanoid would be the biggest success monetarily. Greatest success, not necessarily monetarily, is Collapsus, which is our game we're working on now, because it's our first big multi-platform thing. We're being allowed to release on Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft platforms for this. We're doing a physical arcade cabinet of it, which is going to be seen by a whole bunch of people. We won a whole bunch of awards for it. We won Slightly Beast App of the Year Award for Best Upcoming App. We won the most successful game at GDEX from the charity. We won the second best game in Indie PopCon 2017. We won the best game at the Ohio Game Development Expo in 2016. We were also part of the Internationally Traveling Game Masters, the exhibition, which meant that we were standing feet away from like some of Miyamoto's original Mario sketches, like framed behind bulletproof glass, which was really cool. And that was that they tour around the world, and so when they came to Columbus, we were asked to demo Collapsus on that day as part of the exhibit, which was amazing. Because of it, we were on TV a couple times. We were on NPR a couple times. We were in the newspaper like 5 times. We were on like 10 different podcasts. So the game's not even out. So it can't be our biggest financial success. We can't make money off of it if it's not released. But it has proven to be incredibly successful already. So hopefully that will actually translate to monetary success once it releases. What game dev books do you recommend? Woo! Okay, so I'm going to shamelessly plug one of my friend's books. His name is Jared Huntley. He just released a book called Game Programming for Artists. I believe that's the title, and it is transcendent. It's one of those moments where like your friend does something cool and you're really proud for them, but then you're like, oh, wow, my friend's better at this than I'll ever be. That's reading his book. Other than that, I don't read a lot of game dev books. I used to, but it was like Sam's Teach Yourself Programming in 24 Hours back when I was like 15. Trying to think, because one of the biggest problems is you have a lot of blogs and a lot of things where it's kind of a living source of information, and that's typically where I get most of my stuff from there. No, definitely, I would say Jared's book would definitely be wonderful, and it's a great source if you're a programmer or if you're an artist. Like it's game programming for artists, but it's beyond that. I believe there was a book I read called, I believe it was the Game Dev Cookbook, I believe. That's old and sitting on my shelf. So that is, I'm not equipped to answer that question, mostly because I'm some sort of illiterate swine, I guess.
Ask him what game he's proud of. Well, he might just answer it.
Middle school reading level. Oh, that's beautiful. That is hilarious. I actually, in 2nd grade, I had a post-college reading level.
What?
We took this dumb thing called the President's Reading Exam, but no, I don't read as much as I used
Preferred.
to.
Programming language.
And IDEs.
Yeah, that might give us.
It's much easier to pull up a YouTube video or to listen to a podcast or to read a blog whilst I'm working rather than an actual book.
audio.
Preferred programming language, C#.
What about his biggest challenges in development?
Yeah, C#. Yeah. You can't go wrong with C#. If you not X and A. What succeeded X and A?
Zerman?
I use Unity in conjunction with C#, but for most things. But IDE, I don't program that much, unfortunately. So I believe that IDE in a developer environment, correct? Smile and nod at me real quick. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think. It's what replaced X and A. I can't remember. Vision? No. It's. I'm gonna Google it because I'm smart.
Ask him Eclipse or NetBeans. Then your question.
I mean, Eclipse is fine. I actually have a livid passion for Visual Studio merely because it has like the longest startup time.
SSDs for life.
X8A, okay.
What was your question?
What was his biggest challenge?
Mono.
in development?
Or single biggest challenge? Or?
Yeah, sure.
After that, ask him what.
That's my answer. Mono.
Did you say mono development?
There's a reason I have people to program for me. I have an art background as well as a design background.
And what's your name?
Before I answer this question, I have an art background as well as a design background, and then I picked up programming, and then I ended up hiring people who are far better at it than I was. And this was I started hiring people back in like 2007, so like to do it for me. Single biggest challenge as a developer: feature creep. Learning to defeat feature creep. Learning also to defeat the idea that perfect exists. I have this big problem where, as I'm working on a project, especially a project that's going to take a while, I have cooler and cooler ideas for it. And I also, as I'm looking right at it, I hate it. I hate what I'm making because it never compares with what's in my head. And I keep adding new ideas to try to sort of chase that perfection that I want. And eventually you have to ship. Eventually you have to say, it's done. I have to put it to market now. And it is one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to work with. It's one of the most difficult challenges because in my head, no, just give me 5 more minutes. I can add something new, something cool, something that makes it transcendent rather than just good or even great. I don't think I can settle for great anymore. It's my own internal neuroses. I battle with a lot of anxiety. I have my entire life, and that manifests itself in my game development. And being the person who leads the team, I act as creative director for the entire studio. I'm always trying to make everything perfect, and that comes to the point where I'm like, no, we can give him a really cool like double jump. It'd be great. Let's do it. Let's do the double jump. And it's just, Jay, we can't do the double jump. It's time. It's done. Let's call it done. Let's ship it out. Now, also, a lot of my programmers, the ones I usually fight with on feature creep, Mark is kind of the main programmer on Collapse right now, and he is self-professed lazy. So he and I always meet somewhere in the middle. It's like, well, you do this week, and it's eventually just like, well, I don't wanna. I'll do these things, and eventually we're like, okay, instead of the 7 features I want him to get in, and the 2 features he wants to do in, he'll just do 5 things, and that usually works out. But yeah, That's the biggest challenge, is fighting the urge to keep working on it when it should be shipped.
I have one that like follows this up. Can I put that in?
Ooh, okay, how do you balance your own ideas with the creative input and ideas of your team? Well, the thing about being a creative director is that you have the final say over any creative decision. If you say a feature is in, or if you say a feature is not in, then it is, or it isn't. And it's hard sometimes because you're like, no, it should be this way. It should absolutely be this way. And then a programmer or another designer or an artist is like, no. Usually, and this costs some development time. So you want to do this early on. You never want to do this late stage, where it's like, okay, well, let me see it. Let me see what your idea is. I want to see it. And even sometimes after you see it, you're just like, I don't know. Sometimes you have to handle it democratically. Sometimes you have to be like, team, all huddle in. Yeah, I know you're not working on this project. Come here. Okay, which thing do you like better, A or B? And they're like, B. And you're like, oh, well, I guess I lost. Fine. And then we put it in, and then it's great. And I eventually learn to love the change, and it's fine. Sometimes, though, you have to just put down the hammer. We had this thing where Jeff, who was working on Jeff ended up leaving the company a few years ago, but he was working on the beta for Collapsus, and he wanted the XP bar to start in the middle and grow outward. And I knew that was a choice because he didn't want to map coordinates. He was just being lazy. And I'm like, no, it goes from left to right. It's a thing. And we went back and forth on it for a while, and eventually I'm like, look, put it on the left. And he did. Now, as far as I don't know, it's just really, you have to trust. You have to trust other people that their ideas are as good as yours, but you also have to make sure that you've done enough to earn their trust, where they're like, you know what? Yeah, you're the creative director for a reason. Maybe my idea isn't that good. And then compromise is your friend. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, I don't want to include that, but how can we talk it out to make something that encompasses both of our ideas? Like we had this mode in Collapsus. Collapsus is a puzzle game. We had this mode in Collapsus where he wanted to do what's called cluster mode, where matches were generated in clusters. Rather, it was for a challenge mode. We had like a boatload of those. And I'm like, okay, well, fine, we can do that, but let's also add this power-up in to make it where, it could go back to the original mode. And those things we went back and forth on for a while. It's about trust. It's really, you just gotta trust the people you brought in.
All right.
John asked, what's the preferred engine that they
Next.
Yeah. Which engine do they use? Unity, Unreal, Source, or proprietary?
Preferred engine. Okay, already answered this. Unity. I love Unity. As far as what engines do we use, we started back in the day with an engine called Stagecast. It was a little Java engine. It was created for students. It's awful. We made some prototypes in that, some of the 50 terrible prototypes. We then worked in a little open source Dark Basic engine called Project Phoenix. If you've never heard of Dark Basic or Project Phoenix, count yourself lucky. After that, that's when we switched to Corona SDK, which is Lua-based, pretty multi-platform. I hate it. I hate it with a fiery, livid passion. And then we moved on to, no, before Corona, we were working in, Torque. We were working in Torque for a while to do some 3D stuff. Then we moved to Corona, which is more for 2D, and then after that we hit Unity and never looked back. I've experimented around with Unreal, and I will tell you right now, if you are trying to decide between Unreal and Unity, pick the one you have the most experience with and just do that. They are different but comparable, and whatever you're making, the engine will fight against you. Neither one is better than the other. We've thought about doing a project in Lumberyard, in Amazon's Lumberyard. We decided against it because our biggest philosophy is pick the engine you know how to use, and since we've been using Unity for the past like 7 years, it's the one we know how to use, so it's the one that's best. The best engine is the engine you can use. We do also do work with Construct, which is not an engine. It's a toolkit for creating games. You can call it an engine if you squint at it. We do that for a lot of smaller projects as well as rapid prototyping. We'll make a lot of stuff in Construct before we move it over to Unity. And it's great. I love it. If you ever wanted all the fun of Game Maker without the interface being terrible and without the thing breaking on you every 5 minutes, I did a little Game Maker in my spare time in high school. We never did it for Wraith. But if you want something that is great for rapid prototyping or for making really, really interesting small games quickly and professionally, Construct. Absolutely. It's also multi-platform as all get out. It can be run on basically anything with a screen. You can run it on your tablet. You can have a game engine right on your tablet, and then you can export it to basically anything with a screen because it's HTML5 native. And I am in love with HTML5. I don't program in HTML5. I haven't touched HTML since the last time I worked on the website. But having things that export into HTML5, beautiful. So the big answer is Unity and Construct.
How do you go about making inroads with the main consoles to work with them? Because with Google and Valve, they're pretty open, but Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony are pretty closed.
Sorry, you said how do you go about making the
inroads with Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and getting into even talking with them. Since you said that they are working with them now, so that should be fresh news. Since Valve.
Ooh. Okay. So. How do you go about making the inroads? I understand what that means, though I've never seen that written out, with Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, etc. Love this question. So, we submitted to Nintendo back when that meant something, and it means something again now, but I'll explain what that means in a second, back in the middle of the Wii U's lifespan. And we submitted a form, and then we didn't hear back from them for 6 months. What they were doing was vetting us. They were doing background checks and looking at every bit of work we've ever done. And when it was all done, they gave us our own personal agent who was assigned to our case and our case only, and we were able to work with them. Nintendo then, near the end of the Wii U's lifespan, opened up development to anyone until the Switch. And now you have to do that whole submission process for the Switch again, except it's even harder. As far as Sony is concerned, I was incredibly fortunate to know another Sony developer it's the game studio Multivarious in Columbus. They're good friends with our studio, and I'm pretty good friends with the people who run it. And we were just having like a talk. We were just talking to each other, And he's like, oh, doing that whole Nintendo thing. Nintendo's pretty hard to work with when you were with Sony. And I'm like, yeah, I've never really thought about it. And he's like, I will send them over your contact information and then make an introduction over email. And I'm like, you are the coolest. And so a few weeks later, he's like, oh, just wanted to do, Jay, just wanted to introduce you to Katie, Jay. Does Wraith Games, their team's awesome. And then Katie worked with Sony, and Sony's awesome. And then from there, we just did all the process of becoming Sony developers. There was an open submission process, but they have some weird requirements. And the dumb thing about their weird requirements are they are all under NDA. So I can't tell you what they are. You basically have to submit and then sign an NDA, and then they'll give you the weird requirements, and if you don't meet them, then you're not developers, and that is so dumb. But we had an in. We just had a pretty easy in. As far as Microsoft is concerned, they had a similar submission form, and we submitted, and then within a week, they're like, welcome to the Microsoft family. Okay, thank you. What Microsoft is mostly concerned about is showing that you have a game already done, or at least mostly done. So if you have something that you are proud of, submit to Microsoft and you're fine. As far as Valve's not on the list, but I'm gonna say a little bit on Valve. We were successfully greenlit, and then Greenlight went away, meaning all of our months of getting votes was for nothing. But they're great to work with too, because you get basically just to email them questions and they'll give you answers. It's great. Same thing. I've noticed with Sony, sometimes I'll send a question and it's 2 weeks later I get a response. With Microsoft, they're the same day, and with Nintendo gave us a phone number. So technically I have the number for our rep for Microsoft and Sony. We're not supposed to call them. With Nintendo, you are literally allowed to call them anytime during business hours. They're I believe they're in Seattle. I could be very wrong about that. So time zones are important. But you can just call them up and I have tons of questions. Ooh, I see another question being typed out.
Are you able to tell us how much money the processing fees were?
You said the profiting fees?
Processing.
Oh, processing
For
fees.
licenses.
That makes a lot more sense.
Redmond, Washington, yes. Okay, Nintendo is in Redmond. Are you going to tell me how much the processing fees were? Okay, so there are no processing fees. There are fees to get your dev kits. Fees I am not legally allowed to disclose. Get a loan, kids. Submit a business plan. You'll need it. I can't tell you how expensive things are, but I can tell you you're gonna need a loan.
Man, it's just like every country.
It's bad. But yes, Nintendo is in Redmond, Washington. I completely blanked on that. But yeah, no. When you submit these forms, the forms are free. They'll process you. They'll give you a yes or no. There is no harm in submitting. There's none. If you're turned down now, they may not turn you down in 6 months. If you have something you're proud of showcasing, submit. Is the dev kit the only cost, or is there more? Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's the dev kit. Everything else is handled for you. It gets a little trickier if you're doing physical releases. We have recently opted to go through a publisher. The deal's not closed. The deal won't be closed until December, so I'm not allowed to talk about that. But we've decided to go with a publisher who will handle like marketing fees and stuff, as well as print fees for physical media if we go that route. But the last I checked, before we went with a publisher to make our lives dealing with these companies easier. It was the dev kit. But the question of is the dev kit the only cost? Oh, don't worry, it's enough. Once you get that bill, it's enough. You won't feel like you owe them anything else after that.
I'm gonna.
Your guy at the Unitarian was like, I think he said that the new one was like 30,000.
Oh, did this stop?
Okay, so any insight into the educational games market? I do not. A little story behind that. Back in 2007, we were asked to make a series of games for an online school, and made a prototype, and they really liked it. And then they didn't do anything. They didn't give us our money to make more. They didn't give us the money for the one we made, and so we're like, oh, okay. We've talked a little bit about working. There's another company in the same building we work with who does educational software, and we've occasionally, when we see each other in the hallway, like, oh, maybe we should do like an educational game together sometime. But beyond that, not really. Our end of the education spectrum is we work with high schools and colleges. We go and we give lectures, and we also tell them how to build better game development programs. We also take interns and teach them how to make games and things. So on the educational side for us, which is actually a huge part of our business, which mind you is actually something we do for free. We don't actually make money off of it, but we go and we try to make the next game developers of the future, rather than using games to make better students in general. We do gamification services, though, where a company can pay us, like a school or a business can pay us. It's $80 an hour. So we've had like one taker. And even then that was more of a consultation than anything, where we will go and we will gamify their structure. So we'll be like, A through F grades suck. Don't do that. Instead, offer experience points, things like that. But no, we don't do much with the actual educational games, unfortunately, because it's a really interesting market, and at some point it'd be nice to see more people in the educational games market giving talks at events like this, because it's a great industry.
Except it hardly exists, but oh well.
I don't think I have any more.
I think I'm good. So. Oh, here's a question. Can we contact you in the future?
Well, can we contact them more after?
The dumb faces I'm making should be worth the price of admission alone. Can we contact you in the future? Yes. My email is jay@writhgames.com. And I'm also the guy who runs our social media, so Twitter @Wraith Games. You can, anytime, message me, and I will do my darndest to get back to you. Sometimes it may take like a week, but I love answering questions about the industry, because I feel that in order to build a stronger industry, we have people who know what they're doing tell people who don't yet know what they're doing, and then once you guys know what you're doing, you can pass that on to other people. So I don't just say, can you? Yep, those are correct. I don't just say, can you contact me? I would be disappointed if you didn't. And I see that there are only 4 of you left. That's a kind of a shame. But of course there are other talks going on, so I understand why that is the case. I hope there has been a camera in the back recording my big, giant, projected, dumb face for social media and
A little
stuff.
bit ago.
Ran out of space so possible, so.
During the decision.
Unfortunately, it ran out of space a little while ago. Do you at least have like some still shots for like social media and stuff of just like the great and powerful Oz? I don't actually know how big your projector screen is, to be honest. Though. It may not be that great and powerful. We at least have the beginning, and might actually have screen capture of the call. Ooh, that's spiffy. That'd be great. Because if you have the talk and can throw it up onto like YouTube or something, so that other people have the ability to see it and learn from it, I think that would be a great opportunity. Unless you don't want to, in which case don't.